Hey y'all, welcome to Mortis Media and my scary stories for Pride Month. After listening to these stories, please use the links provided to go to Mortis Media's half of the collaboration. I hope you all enjoy. Number 1. Dan. When I was in my 20s, I went through a very strange time in my life. I was living alone in an apartment and working at a consulting firm. It was great having a 9-to-5, Monday to Friday job with the weekends off. Before that, I had only ever really worked in retail. So during this period of time, my private life got a whole lot easier to deal with. When I was younger, I was a bit of a clubber. I mean, Friday night at the suburban club and Saturday night in the city bar hopping. And that was what I did practically every weekend. However, by the time this story happened, I was a bit tired of that scene. I was trying to meet people, go to restaurants, movies, or even just stay home and play video games. So I began talking to this guy named Dan. And our friendship was really weird from the beginning. He was a major homebody. I had been enjoying spending more time at home at this part of my life. He was into some new age sort of things, which I thought was also interesting at the time. But honestly, I think we were both just looking for friends at the time, and didn't have any real interest in being together. We had talked on the phone a lot, and the first time we met, I felt that we had a connection. I mean, this is really hard to explain. I was very attracted to him. He was tall and slim. He wore black all the time. Hell, I even discovered later on that even his underwear was black. But that's another story. But even though neither of us were interested in a relationship, we grew close, and he wanted to cuddle with me on this couch. Well, he got up to turn the light off, and when he did, I felt my nervous system sort of jump. I hadn't expected that to happen. And somehow, he felt what I felt, and described what happened to me perfectly. It was odd, and I have no explanation for it, and I really don't need one. I just felt connected to him. Although he was my age, he was very new to gay relationships. Dan had only been involved with women before, and a few months after our friendship began, he fell hard for a guy who he was talking to online. This guy lived in a different state, and supposedly the two of them decided that the guy was going to drive up to stay with Dan for a week. Well, on the day he was supposed to arrive, Dan called me, crying. He said his guy stopped halfway through the drive. He decided not to come, and the two of them argued on the phone, to the point where the guy, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, threatened to kill himself and stopped answering his phone. I went over to Dan's house to try and comfort him in any way that I could. It was awful. He was crying. He would be calling this guy on the phone. Occasionally the guy would answer. Dan would offer to drive down and pick him up, and the guy would refuse and threaten to kill himself again before hanging up. It was a nightmare, and there wasn't much I could do other than hold my friend and be there for him. At one point in the night, he got up to get some water. I told Dan I would get it for him, but he insisted that he needed to get up and get out of bed to stretch his legs, so I let him go. The apartment was dark. It always was. I sat up in the bed, waiting for him to come back. After a while, I saw the outline of his shadow as he slowly walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. It wasn't until he was standing in the doorway of his bedroom that I saw Dan was holding a large knife in his hand. I jumped out of the bed and went over to him quickly. I had no fear that he was going to use the knife on me, but I was scared that he would use it on himself. I was too late, though. He had already slashed his left arm into ribbons. There was blood everywhere, and he was gushing it so quickly that I was convinced he was going to die. I was able to compress the many wounds as I called 911 on my own phone. An ambulance made it to the house, and he did recover. However, he spent 3 months in a psychiatric ward recovering. And here is the worst part. The guy he had done this over had never even left his home to come and see Dan. It was all an act. It was a sick and manipulative drama that was a game to this guy, and it nearly killed my friend. You have to be really careful about what you do online. Playing games can definitely be the death of someone.
Number 2. Bloody drink. When I was younger, and first had an opportunity to go to gay pride, I was caught up in it deeply. I was a teenager at the time, and over the next few years its appeal was still pretty strong to me. But as I got into my early 20s, it became a sort of hit or miss thing with me. What I mean is that I would go if I could get a group of friends to go with me, but if not, it wasn't really a huge loss for me if I didn't make it. But regardless, I always looked at Pride Month as both a good thing and something that I did enjoy. Of course, opinions actually vary a bit about this in the LGBTQ community. To some people, Pride is like Christmas every year. They wouldn't miss it for anything in the entire world. There are also those who are indifferent to it, and some who, for one reason or another, actually hate everything there is to do with gay pride. A few years back, I wasn't able to get any of my friends over for Pride Day. I was working a Monday through Friday job, and none of them were. I mean, really. Every one of my close friends were working on Sunday. So since I did not have to get up early the next morning to get a good spot for the parade, I decided to stay out late at the clubs the night before. Not having anyone to dance with, I spent most of my time sitting at the bar talking to the bartender, who I knew. I figured I was up for a night of nothing more than people watching, when I caught the eye of another guy at the bar. He was about my age, pretty cute, and I definitely didn't know who he was. After a while, the guy came over to where I was and we started talking. His name was Troy, and we hit it off pretty good. We talked for a while and eventually, he asked me back to his place for a drink. I couldn't say I was in the habit of doing this all the time, but I decided to go ahead and go with it. He gave me directions before he left, and I let him know that I would be along. I arrived at his place and was a bit surprised. He owned a pretty big house, it seemed. He told me before that he lived alone, so I wondered what one guy would do in such an enormous place by himself. Going inside, he kept it lit dimly, which was what I noticed at first. He led me into a den and had a bar there, making me a drink. I took it and sat down on a cold leather couch, and he sat in a chair by me. There was something about him that was different at his home than at the club. "Do you want me to try something different?" he asked me. His tone of voice was a little suggestive and made me a bit uncomfortable. I simply nodded. That was when Troy went to the bar and took out a knife. He made a drink. I think it was gin. And then he slit his arm and let his blood leak into the glass. After that, he wrapped something around his arm. He picked up the blood drink and brought it over to me. "Wanna try it?" he asked me, offering me the glass. I shook my head. "Just not ready yet," Troy told me. "That's okay. You will be." He then drank from the glass while he was talking to me. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I just talked to him while he drank the drink, and I waited until he got up to go to the bathroom. Then I immediately left the place before he came out. I just needed to get as far away as possible. He tried messaging me, but I never answered him. It was too weird and creepy an experience. With things like HIV out there, and the very fact that blood can be poisonous, I was too creeped out that a person like that even existed. It was awful.
Number 3. Mandy. This happened to me when I was still in high school. I was just beginning to suspect that I might either be a lesbian or bisexual during that time period. I guess that's a normal time for figuring that sort of thing out. I hadn't really figured, though, that I would explore it too much at those early stages of life, if it hadn't been for a male friend of mine. He was gay, and had agreed to be interviewed at the school newspaper, along with a girl who was bisexual. When I found out the girl was someone that we both knew, I very much wanted to talk to her about it. Her name was Mandy. She was a bit of a punk sort of girl. Her hair was always ending up different colors. She wore a lot of leather and went to a lot of concerts. This was far different from me, who either stayed home more of the time or hung out in the hallways after school. But we still sort of knew each other. We wrote some notes back and forth, using my gay male friend as the carrier of those notes. And I guess, as is the way that happens a lot with teenagers, we started developing feelings for each other rather quickly. Although we didn't have a lot of time to actually hang out and talk, mostly during gym class and after school, we communicated a whole lot through the notes and over the phone, and that worked pretty good for us. After a decent amount of time interacting like this, however, we both felt that we should probably spend some time alone to talk in person. So Mandy invited me over to hang out at her house one evening after school, with the idea that I would be spending the night over there. I was a bit surprised, but not in a bad way, that her parents and siblings were not at home that evening. Mandy's room was a lot like I assumed it would have been. She had covered the windows in duct tape so it was dark. She had a lot of posters of bands. She had a black light. She immediately began burning incense. It was very atmospheric. We had a really nice time talking. Our conversation went a lot deeper than it had before. And that was when Mandy revealed something to me. She told me that she was nervous to reveal this, but if I would be sleeping over, I would end up finding out anyway. She showed me plenty of bandages on her arms and on her legs, and when I asked why she had those, she said that she occasionally would cut herself out of frustration. She didn't want to scare me off, although I have to admit I was a bit put off by the idea. But I could understand that life could sometimes get really aggravating and frustrating, so perhaps that was just one of the things that made it easier for her to deal with it. We had a great evening for the rest of the time, and eventually we both went to sleep. We didn't fool around or anything like that, but we did end up sleeping in the same bed. At that point it had seemed like the perfect night, and then I woke up in pain. I wasn't sure what had happened, but something had hurt my arm really bad. I tried jerking it away from the pain, but something was holding it there. When my eyes adjusted, I saw Mandy was kneeling by the side of the bed, holding my arm and a knife. It took me only a few moments to realize that she had cut me, and it looked like she had cut herself again too. I struggled against her, and she quickly let go of my arm. I jumped out of the bed, asking her why she had done that. She was eerily calm about it. She explained that she wanted me to know how it felt to be cut. That she, in fact, liked the feeling, and wanted me to like it too. She was too nervous earlier to bring up the possibility of asking me to do it, so she did it to me while I was asleep. It was way too weird. I told her I had to leave. She tried very hard to get me to change my mind, but that wasn't happening. I was too freaked out. I gathered my things and went out the door. She could tell I was upset and didn't follow me. I went to a payphone and called my parents. Mandy apologized over and over again. I let her know that I accepted her apology, but I also didn't really want to pursue a relationship with her anymore. It was too weird and scary after that. She persisted for a while, trying to get me to change my mind, but it didn't happen. We went back to really just being acquainted. That was many years ago, and I have no idea what's happened to her since.
Number 4. Strange date. When I was in college, I lived in the dorms in my freshman year. I was fortunate, however, because I was able to actually rent a full apartment. The dorm at NIU was called Douglas Hall, and it had a few full apartments on the top floor. I had a huge scholarship, so was able to afford the price of the room. Of course, in college I decided I was going to live free and do a whole lot of things. Okay, I guess I'm trying to find a delicate way to put it that I was sleeping around a whole lot. Basically, I was a bit of a slut in college. There, I said it. I'm not particularly proud or ashamed of it. I did have a really weird experience though. Me and this other guy, Jake, were both dating the same guy. It wasn't a huge deal, because the guy didn't ever say our relationship was exclusive, but we both stopped seeing that guy. Then Jake and I began talking a lot. He lived pretty far away, about a 90-minute drive, but we got along pretty well and he was cute, so I invited him to come over. We clicked immediately. Jake was pretty smart, but he skipped going to college. He had never been on a campus before, but he really loved it. I could tell he was overwhelmed by the sheer number of people on campus. After eating, I invited him back to my dorm room. We had to walk through the entire dorm to get to my room. Jake was again very interested in the culture, people in the dorms with their doors open and walking around in their underwear in co-ed dorms. He seemed fascinated. We played games and talked until late into the night. I was trying to seduce Jake, but he was a bit weird about it. I guess I was trying to get him to make the first move, but he wasn't biting. So I told him it was too late for him to drive home and that he could stay there overnight. We went into the bedroom. I changed clothes, and Jake did the weirdest thing though. He actually went over to the window. There was a lamppost outside the window and there was a swarm of bugs, and he stared at it. I stripped down to my boxers and Jake simply stood at the window. He didn't move, he didn't talk. All he did was stare out. I was a bit unnerved. I picked up a textbook and read it a little. I had wanted him to get undressed and to get into bed with me, but he didn't. He just continued to stand there at the window. He didn't move or look at me in any way. I wanted to ask him to get into bed somehow, but he was so strange looking at that light. He may have been standing there for over an hour, completely not moving. Finally, he asked me what he should wear to bed. He told me he didn't bring any PJs or anything because he wasn't expecting to spend the night. I told him to sleep in his underwear. He stripped down to a pair of silk boxers and climbed into bed with me. I guess when looking at things he was probably nervous and socially awkward, but it was so creepy how we stood there for nearly an hour staring at that light. Nervous or not, he was really good in bed. Jake and I continued to talk for a while. We never talked about his behavior that night though, and to this day I still have no idea what happened.
Number 5. Pizza. I came out of the closet in high school. Well, it wasn't really that I came out of the closet, as much as I just refused to be anyone other than me. I don't think that now, or even back then, if you would have seen me, or even hung out with me, you would have assumed that I was gay immediately. But if I see a hot guy, I'm gonna obviously check him out, and I won't pretend to be someone that I'm not. For the most part, I didn't have much trouble in high school, though. This was back in the early 90s, and although tolerance still had a long way to go, it was at least on its way. However, there was one group of guys who decided that they had to give me a hard time about it. They would call me names. One of the guys would actually sometimes get up on my face and growl at me. And no, I'm not kidding. He would actually do that. But they never laid their hands on me or anything like that. When I was 17, I got a job delivering pizzas after school. My parents had bought me a really nice car as a birthday present, and I needed money to pay for gas and insurance. The pizza place I worked for was really nice, and even to this day, I have fond memories of it. So anyway, this story takes place on a Friday night. I was working, and it was just coming close to the end of the evening. I had a few orders that I had to deliver, and then my day would be over. One of the houses that I pulled up to was completely new to me. I hadn't ever delivered there before. When I opened the door, I was taken aback. A very sexy guy of about my age answered the door, and he gave me the once-over and immediately took on a really flirtatious behavior with me. Although I didn't intend on fraternizing with customers, I have to admit I was very attracted to him. He didn't have his wallet on him, and he invited me into the house, so he didn't have to keep the door open. Another thing I seldom do is go into someone's home, but again, he was flirting with me, and I was enjoying that. But seated in the living room of the house were the other 4 guys from school, the ones who always gave me shit for being gay, and that was when I assumed I'd been duped. The guy who always growls in my face got up and shoved me up against the wall, and things would have gotten really bad after that. However, being a young gay guy in the early 90s, when gay bashing was more prevalent than it is nowadays, I did make sure I had something to protect me. As the guy held me up against the wall, I grabbed the pepper spray out of my pocket and sprayed it all over his face. Another guy tried to come at me, and he got sprayed too. Fortunately for the other guys and the cute guy, they didn't try, and I opened the door, got out to my car, and quickly left. I drove back to the pizza parlor, and my boss called the police. The guys couldn't deny the story because of the pepper spray. All of them got into serious trouble. Be careful, and don't ever feel bad about carrying something to protect yourself.
Number 6. Balcony. There was a Pride weekend when I decided not to go to Pride. It was a regular thing for me, but I was feeling pretty lonely. I didn't have anyone to go with me though, and I didn't want to just be alone there. So this was a long time ago. This happened before smartphones, so there were not any apps like Grindr or anything. I think it was Planet Out that I was using. I found this guy who was very interesting to me. He lived in a high-rise building in Chicago and apparently lived in the highest priced area. I decided to meet, and he invited me to his apartment. I don't remember the name of the building, but it was very tall. He lived on the 19th floor, which I found a bit amusing, because Fraser lived on the 19th floor. I am deathly afraid of heights, but I wasn't worried about that. I would just not go towards his window. The guy's name was Joffrey, and no, I'm not kidding, of course this happened long before Game of Thrones, but fortunately he let me call him Jeff. We went out to eat. He was super talkative when we were out. That was fine, because I liked talking. He invited me back to his apartment. When we got there, he went into the bathroom for a while. He came out, and he was a lot less energetic. It was weird how quickly his mood changed. He became very quiet and sluggish. It turned out Jeff was a pill popper. He told me he had taken a stimulant before, and he was worried that he was talking too much. So in the bathroom, he took a depressant. He took a lot of conflicting pills that day. Jeff was very forward and seemed to like me a lot. We went on a few dates, and each time we went back to his high-rise apartment, his moods were always changing based on how many pills he was taking. Jeff one day told me that if I would be his boyfriend, I would never have to worry about money again. I know a lot of people may have jumped at the chance, but not me. It was a total turn-off. And I was at his apartment, and I think he could tell I was not too happy about the offer. Jeff went into the bathroom again, and I guess he was taking pills in order to change his mood. When Jeff came out, he seemed more aggressive than usual. He wanted me to go out onto his balcony, but I didn't want to. I told him I was terrified of heights, but he really wanted me to do it, and was being quite forward about it. I didn't want to upset him. So he opened the door and I slowly stepped onto the balcony with a glass of wine. Then immediately when I did, he quickly closed and locked the sliding glass door. Panic gripped me fast. I told you I was scared of heights. Well, damn, I was terrified, and even though I knew I shouldn't, I looked down. Agree to be my boyfriend and I'll let you back in, Jeff demanded. I got dizzy and actually fell to my knees. I was 19 stories up in the air and was absolutely gripped by fear and panic. My fear intensified and took over, making me imagine myself falling off the balcony. There was nothing for me to grab onto either. I was on my hands and knees, and I had to keep my eyes closed. I actually began crying and finally told him that I would be his boyfriend if he let me back in. I don't believe you, Jeff told me. I think I need you to be out there a little bit longer before I believe you. I pleaded with him. It was so hard for me to tell you how scary this was. I have never been so frightened in my life. I get scared watching YouTube videos where people climb buildings. After a while, I just curled up into a ball crying from fear. I was out there for a long time before Jeff finally opened the door and let me back in. His mood had changed again, and he was now begging me to forgive him. He blamed everything on the pills and told me he would never do anything like that again. I punched him. He fell down and I immediately left for the elevator. He came after me, begging, but I made it without him. I never spoke to him again. Anyone who would expose someone to their greatest fear is not someone I ever wanted to talk to.
I want to thank my good friend Mortis Media for this collaboration. Please use the links provided to check out his half of the collaboration. It will mean a whole lot to me. Also, I have always done my LGBTQ themed videos on my own, so it means a whole lot to me that Mortis Media has joined me to do this one. It was actually his idea. Thank you so much, buddy. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell below, or wait for the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the email included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.